KA3YJM of the Northeast Maryland Amateur Radio Club, or NEMARC for short. The following Fireside Video Chat Presentation is hosted by our Spence, WT8WV. This recorded discussion is targeted around the topic of antennas for 160, radials, capacitors, wire types, and configurations of various antennas are discussed in this unscripted hour-long recording. There's a wealth of practical information packed into this clip, so get out your pad and pencil to take some notes, settle back, and listen to some folks talk about the fascinating amateur radio topic of 160. Lastly, be sure to check out our radio club at nemarc.org on the web.
Yes.
Insulator in the post. Okay, and there's the wire heading on up.
Well, we ought to try and get that link of where to get that variable capacitor. That would be one thing there. Now, I was going to say that I've seen other configurations that I guess does the same thing as the variable capacitor. It's some big coil of some sort, or I don't know if they're hand winding that or how many bazillion feet have to be wound on it.
Now, Gary WC3N is not here. But he put up an inverted L. He did not use a capacitor. He cut his 130 feet. He cut it a quarter wavelength and tuned it for 1.840.
Is he using a transformer like you would for NFED, or?
No, I'm not sure. I just thought he was feeding the wire. I mean, he put out his radials. He has more ground than I do for radials. He put out his radials, and now he bought a box, and he got a variable capacitor. The brand name of that capacitor is Jennings, Jennings. And if you go to eBay and you put in there, Jennings capacitors, you'll see them. Now, the collars. I had them made. There's a guy, his name is Floyd, and you can find him, and you can find capacitors there too. His website is EagleMade, EagleMade, one word, eaglemade.net. And he machines collars exactly for those capacitors.
Are they plastic?
Aluminum.
Aluminum.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's a copper band around the base of the capacitor and the neck of the capacitor. And so you have to make a good solid contact. But he machines them and he bevels them exactly for the Jennings capacitor. Now, they're not cheap. The set of them were under 100. I think I paid like 75 or 80 bucks for them.
Your copper wire that comes off of the standoff going to the capacitor, where is that copper wire connected on the capacitor?
Well, it's the collars. Floyd has about 4 or 5 screws milled in, so it screws right into the bottom of the collar.
Okay.
Same thing on the top. He has a variety of screws milled into it, and so the jumper wire from the top collar to the ceramic insulator is attached to the top collar there.
All right, from a performance standpoint, what do you see from a performance? Where have you worked? How has it worked?
Well, I've got I'm up to 123 confirmed
On 160.
on 160.
Wow.
I have found I had no problem. I mean, no problem working into the Pitcairn Island group. So I can get into the Southwest. I mean, into the South Pacific, Europe. I got Zambia on 160 when the 9J2LA, the expedition was out there. That was That was a rough one, but I got it.
Now, are you running power, or are you running 100
Oh, yeah.
watts, or what?
Oh, I'm running juice.
Okay.
Yep.
But even at 100 watts, those are multipliers that could be had in a contest. Those are contacts that you could be made for worked all states, things like that.
Yeah. No, I'll pump I can pump 1500 into it. I've got the power for 1500, but you know, I mean, a kilowatt, you know, I'll run a kilowatt on CW anyhow to get to Zambia. I mean,
all right, Bob, from your standpoint, K3 or LW, what are you using for yours? Are you using the capacitor like that, or how are you?
I say I'm using an all-center fed dipole, so it's not even
Off-center fed, okay.
And I have something here that I need to put up. I've got an end-fed half-wave. It's a 130-foot wire, and it says one of the ways it can be put up is an inverted L. And I wonder how an end-fed half-wave like that put up in an inverted L would perform. Would it be probably better than the offset fed dipole and not as good as speed filter? Would it be in between, really?
You guys hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead, Don.
So before I knew better, or maybe I still don't know better, I use my end head half wave on 160, and I've got, what, not much, 3 countries and, 22 states for a couple of nights work with that. And
what kind of configuration? Is it sloper? Is it inverted L? Or?
it's pretty much parallel to the ground. I would say that one end is probably at 40 feet and the other end is at about 30 feet.
Yeah, I got a place that I'm putting mine that I might be able to do it in an inverted L configuration, and I wonder if that would help.
I can tell you that after talking to these guys and then doing a little research, apparently the potential issue with that, using that particular end-fed half-wave that I have, is that it can heat up. With the amount that I've used it and the power that I've used on it, it hasn't been a problem. The SWR for the end-fed half-wave is about 2. So I was using it because the feedback that I've gotten from the group here was, my SWR was at 2, I'm good to go. So I'm a little bit confused, but then after looking, there's this Steve Ellington who is kind of and Stephen Fook pointed me in his direction. He has a lot of information, and apparently when he wants to use his end-fed half-wave on 160, he actually bypasses the transformer. So I don't understand all of this yet, but there seems to be some different configuration.
Okay. I'll tell you right now, the reason why you want to bypass that transformer is because, think about this in mathematical terms. The end-fed half-wave for 80 meters to 10 meters, the length of the wire is 130-something feet, which is the length for a half-wave on 80 meters. So if you look at the frequency for 160 meters, that 130 foot wire becomes a quarter wave on 160 meters. So what you got to do is you got to bypass that transformer, because the transformer, remember now, you're feeding in different voltages, and now you're feeding in. Now this is the part of the math that really drives me crazy, but the amount of voltage that going into that transformer was not designed for 160, so that's the reason why it'll heat up. So what he does is he bypasses the transformer, makes it a quarter wave, and now he's got his end-fed half-wave set up as an inverted L, because he finds that's the best configuration for his purpose. Now being that it is now a quarter wave for 160. So basically, in essence, that's where it's become a quarter wave inverted L for 160. Now I'm sure because that the transformer is not there, there are radials laid down to improve obviously the you gotta have the radials for that. So
Yeah, that's what I was worried about. If I do that bypass, then I need the radials the same way that Steve and Gary need for their L's. And I guess, Dan, you must have an L.
I do.
Too. And so then and my problem is I could put 160, I could put a half-wave 160 meter wire up. I could put it over my ditch, but I don't really think I can put out radials. And it looked like that in that Steve Ellington, he was talking about using a 100-foot roll of chicken wire for his. So I have to, and there's been some discussion of radials here. I could put some radials out in a direction. I just couldn't put them out in a nice regular pattern and put them in a circle. I'd have to make some real compromises for any radials that I put
I
down.
think the general consensus is do what you can.
Yep.
Basically. And I'm now, you know, when you mentioned that chicken wire, that does sound familiar. Radios don't have to be wires specifically. You have to understand how radios, the purpose of them. So the chicken wire, I'm sure he's got it in the configuration where he's got the land to do it that serves the same purpose. So he's probably got tons of it, my guess. Oh, yeah, I thought about doing the same thing too, but you know.
So the radial pattern will eventually come into play as far as directivity, is what you're saying?
As we're talking about it earlier, and I've been doing the FT8 and I wasn't 100% tuned in, but I think Steve said yours aren't regularly spaced. Is that what I remember
No,
hearing?
they're regularly spaced. They're just not equally lengthwise.
Go
I
in
mean,
a certain.
I've done my best to make them symmetrical. I just have so many of them that they're so far short of the 120 length that they say is the optimum for 160. I've just got them laid out as far as I can go in my yard. And then, yeah, what the hell, throw the wire up and tune her up and let's rip, see what happens.
Yeah.
I mean, instead of worrying about having a perfect radial system, get whatever radials you can, short ones, long ones, symmetrically. Now, they'll tell you in most of the literature, if you've got less than 12, you don't expect much. I
only have 7.
32 or 36, I can't remember now, but I'm in the 30s. But they are symmetrical. I mean, I started with, north, south, east, west, then divided that in half, then divided it in half again, then again, and so on to try to keep them symmetrical.
Now, what kind of plate are you using? Are you using a plate for that, or are you just eyeballing it back to a ground rod?
No, I bought one of the DX Engineering radial.
Okay, I've seen those.
It has 60 sets of stainless nut bolt lock washer kind of deal. You attach your radial. I attach my radials to that and go from there.
And what kind of wire are you using for that, Steve?
Number 14 house wire.
That's exactly what I'm using.
Now, is that bare wire or is it coated?
No, mine's coated.
Mine's coated too.
Yeah. I mean, that's the cheapest way to go.
I was going to say, you could just buy a couple rolls of it, right?
But, yeah, I bought about 6 rolls, 500-foot spools. I still have a little bit left. I mean, if I wanted to add more radials, I could do it.
So when I put mine up, I asked around and asked Steve and some other people that I know about inverted L's, and the biggest thing I took away from what everybody told me is that get the vertical portion as high as you can possibly get it.
Right.
You get a lot of return from that, and then also was try and get as many radials out, but not only one length. You want to get them in multiple lengths. That way you could use it on other bands, and it'll be worthy on other bands too. It'll tune up a lot easier. And mine's a quarter wave, so I don't have a transformer or a capacitor, but I do have a high-powered DX Engineering Bellin, and my vertical is perfectly up and down. It goes right along the tree trunk of my tree and goes about 80 feet up in the air, and then the other part just kind of comes down at I guess it would be like a 45-degree angle back down to the ground. And that's probably another 40 feet or something like that. But I noticed a big difference when I originally only had 3 radials, because I just got it up and that's all I could get out there was 3 radials, and I added I have up to 7 now, and there was a big jump between the two of them, between the performance and the two. Now the next thing I'm going to do is do exactly what Steve did, is get a DX Engineering plate, and I'm going to, when I finally mow down my grass short enough this this fall, where it doesn't have to be mowed again, and I mow it nice and short. I'm going to put that plate down. I'm going to put some bricks all around the plate, and then I'm going to, I'm of course going to run as many radials out as I can. I'll probably add like another 10 maybe for the wintertime. And 160 is good in the wintertime. And the time that you really want to capture DX on 160 is late at night. Like I'm talking like 2 in the morning till 4 in the morning. It's hot. I've decoded some pretty nice signals from far away.
Now, is that FT8 or are you talking voice?
Yeah,
as well?
FT8, but I've gotten some European sideband too. Okay. So it really lights up in the wintertime and late at night, and you'll see it start to happen right around like 10 o'clock at night, but it gets really sweet in the wee hours.
What's that at 10 o'clock? 160?
Yeah. Yep.
So now, but you're saying that's there are a lot of there. So you're saying there is a lot of activities out there then to be had.
Oh yeah, and it's mostly in the wintertime. I mean, there's
wintertime. Yeah, your South Pacific comes in gray line in the morning.
160?
Oh yeah.
I decoded Australia on 160, and I don't know if I got them or not. I guess I have to look at my own screenshot.
I tell you what, I'm kicking ass in New Jersey.
Yeah, buddy. Come any time of day, you can sleep in.
Yeah, boy.
Well, it seems like, when wintertime comes on 160 at our gray line in the evening, there really isn't much going on. When you really start to get some action is later at night, maybe around 11, 12 o'clock, when you start to see the gray line, the morning gray line in Europe, then they come our way.
Yep.
Okay, so you're up at midnight working the DX in Africa and in Europe. You're working, Australia, Ducie Island, Pitcairn, Japan. Okay. I don't have China, but I got Japan. But that's first thing in the morning when the sun's coming up and the roosters are crowing. That's when you'll start to come in, and you'll actually
last year
have a
160
little bit of daylight. You'll have a little bit of daylight outside in the wintertime when Japan will come in.
Yep.
So I really need to figure out a way to put some ground radials on mine to make it a little bit more efficient. Because right now,
what happens too is
how many do you have?
When you think about it, the braid on a coax is actually a radial, but it's only one. And that'll work, except you've got a real shot at getting a lot of RF back in your shack with only one radial.
well, that's why I use a common mode choke. So I would hate that.
So
yeah, and I have to figure that out.
The more radials you have, the cleaner you are, the more you're getting out of the vertical portion. And the inverted L is transmitting off of the vertical portion, not the horizontal portion. I mean, the horizontal portion is almost acting as a capacitance hat. And that's exactly why it's a relatively omnidirectional antenna. Gary and I were talking about, well, what's the difference about which way do I point the horizontal end? And I said, I don't think it matters because, if I'm getting Africa on the backside, I mean, my horizontal is pointing kind of southwest, about 260 degrees. Well, I'd still nail Japan, and that's around 300. I mean, and
Yeah.
So,
well, if you're saying, Steve, that the horizontal at the top is acting as a capacitant hat, how high up is your vertical part of it then?
about 70 feet now.
70 feet.
I had another tree, but it blew down. I had a tree that was close to I put the box in the ground so that it would be underneath a limb on a tree that existed on the corner of my property. It was a beech tree. And I had the thing up there about 55 feet. and my vertical wire was going straight up. Loved it. Crack. You know, 100-foot tree falls over the edge of the property, took the wire, took everything with it. So the only thing I had left was a tree that's actually outside the back fence, maybe you can see in the picture. So to do that, I had to actually slope the wire away from my box up into the tree.
Really, I was looking at that, Steve. So your vertical isn't really very vertical.
It's vertical in sections.
Yeah.
But, you're right. It's not perpendicular to the ground. Absolutely not. It slopes up into a tree, and then the capacitance hand goes up. But it works.
And
So I was
because
trying
it's
to
coated wire, you're not getting as much interaction with the tree itself, then, right?
Well, actually, the very first wire I ever put up was a copper weld, and that was torn away by the tree. So the next time I put a wire up, I used a coated wire, number 14.
So I
Don,
was
you were
trying
going
to
to say
judge-
something.
I was just trying to judge how tall your vertical was, Steve, and I see that you have a pole that looks like it's doing it, and I couldn't imagine that
Okay,
pole was much taller than
picture-
44 feet or so.
Well, the picture is, that pole is actually the awesome 40-meter vertical that I had during that one contest when I had a 40 and 20-meter vertical, and that's all I had. That's before Ted came by and we shot another arrow through the top of that tree in the back of the lot there. So that right now that antenna is not even connected. It's just there.
The pole's misleading. That doesn't have anything to do with the 160L.
No, the pole, you know, like I said, that picture there's a green line. Because I was talking to Scott about this. I said, hey, Scott, I could actually keep more stuff out of the trees if I put a wire at the top of my 40-meter vertical. That's what the green line is. That's just a projected path. If I attached a wire to the top of the 40-meter vertical, ran it up into the tree, and the green line is, there's the horizontal. The blue one would have been a wire attached to the top of a 20-meter vertical and then up into the tree. But I just went with the red line, which is right at the box, and let it slope back in there. I don't have it pulled taut. I mean, I've got it in a tree here, and then there's another tree on the other side of the lot. And when the wind blows, I mean, I've got slack in there. So there's no stress or strain on the wire.
Very
Steve,
informative. Now I understand much better, Steve. I think that I understand. This is really was that image really was just your ideation or your thinking as you were trying to decide what to do.
Yeah, that's all. Well, you know, you'll read, you know, you don't try for perfect at the expense of good.
Stephen Fook, I've got a question for you there. When we were talking about the radials here a few minutes ago, obviously Steve and others have varying lengths of wire. You mentioned chicken wire there, and that the the characteristics of wire, and that is chicken wire an option?
Well,
I've seen it.
Chicken wire is an option, but
Yeah.
as, Dave and I talked, Dave W6YTG and I talked about that. He said the thing about chicken wire is you got to make sure that you create a great bond with your wires, because the galvanization covering chicken wire can give you a false sense that you have a good connection.
Yeah.
You got to be very, very, very good about making connections with
You almost
copper
get. I
wire.
imagine you had to take like steel wool to it or something like that, just to
I don't know. I didn't try.
because the galvanization really creates a metallic. It's like a coating on the metallic surface.
Right.
Yeah, I've seen people
File would be
experiment.
what you would need.
I've seen people experiment with this. So I mean, now I'm obviously, but I've also seen too with some varying degrees of results. So, I mean, if it was me, I would just stick with the.
Let me ask
wire.
this question. This might be a crazy question there, but let's say that you had an electric fence wire that wasn't turned on, any longer, would that act as any kind of a radial?
Oh yeah.
Dave and I even talked about attaching a wire to my neighbor's fence that he has for his dog. I didn't do it, but
I was thinking about attaching it to my.
Knocked down when the tree went. His fence went too.
I was thinking about attaching it to my horse fence that goes around all 4 acres.
I would say try it.
Yeah. It's a no climb fence. Now it's probably galvanized, so I'd probably have to scrape it down pretty good. Or I don't know what it's made out of, but I mean, this stuff is like impervious to the elements.
I would
say I have an electric fence, and I've got, I don't know how much, but I buy it by the, a quarter mile spool, and that sort of stuff, and it's steel.
What's really funny is
you might try turning that into a beverage.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just thinking of that too.
What's really funny is I have splitting our pastures. We have a north and south pasture, but splitting it, I don't have like 3-board fence, like like you would normally have, or like the no climb that we have in our perimeter. What we use is this temporary, this like tape. It's like this metallic tape that's about like this thick, and it goes the whole way through the middle. I've seen guys actually make antennas out of that stuff, and I guess the width of it has created an antenna that gives you a little more bandwidth that you would normally have, like on 80 meters or 160 even. Because you make a 80-meter dipole, you tune it for either the CW portion or the phone portion. You can't get the whole thing because it's such a because the length of the antenna really changes the tuning.
What about coax? Is there a sweet spot for coax for that? I mean, obviously power comes into play, but if let's say you're using 100 watts.
Yeah, you're using 100 watts. You could run it with 8X without a problem. On 1.8, there's hardly any losses at all.
Yeah, that's what I use, RG8X.
Yeah, I use 213 on mine because of the power, because I got an amplifier, but 8X would work just fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got LMR 400.
Yeah. Ooh. Well, now, Tom, when you were talking about your 160 and you say that you don't really have any radials there, what kind of antenna system are you using then?
I'm using a random wire with a 30, 40, and 80 meter transformer, and it's just a random wire running out. It's about 35 feet above the ground. It goes about 90 feet perpendicular with my privacy fence, and then it takes a 90-degree. It goes 60 feet to a tree, which is about 30 foot up. And then I just ran a straight vertical down today, which is 30 foot down. And that's what I'm using right now. Like I said, New Jersey sounds great.
But
actually, I've got as far as Iowa. But
I'm just going to ask you, from a contest standpoint then, have you actually employed 160 in contests then?
No, I never even thought about it until everybody else starts jumping on the 160 bandwagon. And I said, well, I got to do it too then. They're going to get an extra multiplier.
Right.
So that's the reason I did it. I knew I would have problems with 160.
Right.
And never thought about it. And I'm only going to be running 100 watts on 160 because of the setup. I mean, I might consider 200, but I'm going to start burning up that transformer if I go at it hot and heavy.
All right. When you talk about the transformer, what kind of transformer are we talking about?
Basically, it's the ones that you can see on myantennas.com for their end-fed transformers. It's got some toroids in there.
Okay.
And,
here's what the toroids look like. Okay?
Oh, there you go, right there.
Now there's 3 of them here. Each one is a 52 mix toroid. So I got 3 52 mix toroids stacked. I'm using these to build I actually got 2 sets of them right here. I'm using it to build a transformer for a end-fed half wave that can handle more power. And based on the experiments that Steve Ellington and company have done with it, 50 to 52 mix are the best ones to use, and you have to use 3. And because the ones that the one I have right now, even I haven't even tried to even see how far I can get on 80, but I'm afraid to, because me getting on the roof is like it's like a challenge. So, but when that time comes, I'm going to actually replace that transformer with the 52 mix cores and 12 gauge wire, so that way I can handle. It can handle 500 watts on 80 meters. Now for an NFED halfway 160, which is basically a 260 foot wire, I wouldn't use anything. I wouldn't use anything but this, regardless of the power. But that's just my opinion.
Now, I don't know what my transformer has in it. I don't know what the mix is or how many toroids are in there. I know the ICAS rating is 2 kilowatt, but here again, they could say anything they want.
Yeah, ICAS is kind of like a DDI. Kind of like yeah.
Hey, Stephen, when you're talking about those toroids, that's hard to say sometimes.
It's like hemorrhoids.
Yeah. How expensive are those?
The 52 mix, these are not, I'm trying to think how much I pay for these things. Probably like $7-8 a piece. So they're not cheap, but not out of not out of range. The 43 mix ones are cheaper. You can get for like $1 or $2 a piece, which is actually what you see in a lot of I'm pretty sure like the cheaper NFED halfways probably use a 43 mix. They only use 2 of them. So.
And are those glued together, or did you glue them together?
I glue them together. I use Crazy Glue.
Okay.
You guys see different opinions on how to put these together. They said you could use zip ties and other stuff, but now mind you, when you transmit these things, they heat up. So I don't think zip ties is actually a good idea, because if you put enough heat into it, they'll melt. And
the 43 mix I had in the previous my antennas, I burnt up doing 500 watts on 80 meters. It actually melted the foam around the toroids, and I mean, you could smell it. So I quickly got rid of that transformer and bought a better one, I'm hoping. But I haven't ran 500 watts again on 80 meters.
Now, are those hard to wind, Stephen?
If they're actually, okay, the recommended ones for max power is to use 12 gauge enameled wire. 12 gauge can be a pain to twist.
Yeah, I would say so.
But with the experiments that have been done, 12 gauge is what you want. My first transformer I built, I used 14 gauge, and it was not that difficult. If you have a drill, it'll make things easier, especially the part that the 2 turns around the toroids where there's a twist. Because you're gonna have to, because twisting enamel wire can be a real pain to do by hand. So if you have to drill, you can put it in the chuck and pull the trigger for a few seconds, and it'll do the twist, and that'll make it a lot easier, just for those 2 turns. I think I'm trying to remember now. There's 14 turns total. There's only 2 that have the twist, and the other 12 remaining are just one strand going across. There's a configuration you gotta do, but it's you have to use some elbow grease, but it's not impossible.
I just want to supplement what Stephen's saying a little bit. Stephen directed me towards this Steve Ellington, and just so I should actually get toroids, the 54 mix toroids in the mail tomorrow, a pretty good chunk of them. And there's just a lot of detailed information that he provides on how to make this transformer.
All right. Well, tell us who Steve Ellington is and why we should be looking towards him.
I'm going to let Stephen answer.
Okay. Well, Steve Ellington. Okay, his call sign is November 4 Lima, Quebec. He's somewhere down in North Carolina.
And don't piss him off.
And don't there is such a thing as a stupid question, on his Facebook group page. So, and the reason why he feels that way is because he has tons of information that's on the page and videos on YouTube that he suggests that you read, that you watch and read through it about 25,000 times before you even think about asking a question. Now, if you ask a question that's very difficult, yeah, they'll help you out. But don't say how many turns do I need to make around a toroid when the answer is right there, type of thing.
Right.
They'll jump square in your poop.
Yeah, so at least make an effort to at least try, and then if you run into a stumble, then you can I mean, that's just my opinion on it. I'm sure people have their own opinions, but they are very, and him and a bunch of people are very, very snotty. So, but they are very helpful if you ask them the correct way, and they have a wealth of knowledge. And that's actually where I got all my information on when I was building my first transformer. So he's been doing it for how many? He's been doing this for a lot of years now. So he does a lot of experiments on the subject of infinite half-wave antennas, and the reason why I refer him to people who are interested in it and the technical aspects is because he's done a lot of experiments with it, and he has it well documented on his YouTube page and the Facebook group page. He has, there are precise measurements. There are. And that's how I got the idea with the 12 gauge versus the 14 gauge, because that was just a recent experiment that was done in the past few months. And there's just other stuff that he has done that will save you from going through the headache of if you don't want to experiment yourself. Like in my case, I taking down the antenna just to try something different is not exactly in my workflow. So my opinion, in my view, I appreciate what he's done with what he has the information that he shared about the
videos are very good. The YouTube videos are very good. They're very detailed. The only thing is you have to be a little patient to get to the nuts of what you need. But and watching lots of instructional YouTube videos, when you watch what he shows you, he doesn't leave you with questions about what you need to do. It's clear what you need to do to put the toroids together, to wind the toroids, to hook up the capacitors in between the PL2, SO239, I guess is what that is. It just, the details all there.
Yeah, there's a pictorial too. It tells you, it'll give you the Mauser electronics part number that you need to order if you don't have any. You can get them off of Amazon. Like the capacitors, I think there's you can find them. He's gotten them off of Amazon, and I got the toroids off of Mauser, and what's the other, like Arrow Electronics. There's a couple of them.
Mauser had them in stock the other day.
So what would somebody, if they were wanting to start this project, how would they go about building that antenna? Obviously Steve has shown us this variable capacitor. Others have used toroids. Others have done NFEDs there. What would somebody have in it to at least get started on 160?
A lot of answers for that one.
All right.
If you look at a website for Kilo 6 Mike, he has a helicoidally wound 160 meter vertical on like three 10-foot pieces of PVC pipe with a capacitance hat that he's made out of welding rods, and you wind the wire around. Now you need a ground plane, but that is certainly a compromise if you can't get all the way up in the air. At least you can get something up. There's no question that you can run a dipole. I've had a dipole. It'll work. But the DX is in the vertical, and the vertical performance is based on the height of the vertical element. The higher you can get it, the better it works.
So the flat top part of it is really just the capacitance hat.
Yes.
Okay. So if somebody could get up 60, 70 feet, that would be a good deal, huh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and a lot of the literature will say 50 foot is your that's what you can shoot for. And guys have had them at 40. I mean, and run a longer horizontal and still got out. I mean,
I got mine at 30, 35.
The ground plane, the thing will tune. You know, my thing was, I want to reach the far corners of the world if I can. So I want to go up as high as I can because I know it will perform better the higher I go. Obviously,
So right now, I guess I'm melting sand in my yard and warming the clouds, basically, is what I'm doing with my antenna.
But it works, right?
It does work.
Yeah.
Now, I've only tried it on FT8. I haven't, I haven't used CW or sideband.
What's been your results on FT8 with just what you have?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, let me see how, I did work on NEMARC. Yeah.
There you go.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, we did that one night, I think.
Yeah, I did it all in one night. I guess I got about, 15 states. Nothing foreign, no DX. I've heard them, but I couldn't, and I'm only running 100. Well, I think on 160 I was running about 50 watts on FT8. So, I mean, I'm getting out, and I've only done it maybe 2 or 3 days. Now, tonight I'm going to try it again since I made more of a vertical. I had a 95-degree vertical wire, but it was next to a fence, a metal fence, and I moved it away from that, and it's more vertical now, so I'll give it a shot. I have to use the tuner in here, which it tunes the whole 160-meter band fine.
All right. So, Dan, what is your configuration there, and how high up is your vertical element?
Sorry, I kept muting and unmuting myself. Yeah, so my vertical portion goes up about 80 feet into an oak tree. And then I have, the rest of it is it's sloped down about a 45-degree angle. And I actually have a rope going clear across my property over to my main tower, and that's where I tie it off at. I have a not a pulley, but a D-ring that I have it running through, and it goes down to the bottom of my tower. And then I use a high-powered 1-to-1 balun from DX Engineering at the base of it, because it's a quarter wave, so it's fine. I mean, I have to tune it a little bit depending on where I'm at on 1.8, but I don't need a lot of tuning. I could actually just tune it with my 7300 if I'm going barefoot, but I use my AL80B on it, so I get about, on sideband peaks, I get about 600 watts out, 650 watts. And it's done me really well. I mean, I've gotten European stations on the sideband using that configuration, and I only have seven radials. 2 radials are 100 feet long, and the other radials are about 50 feet long. I think I have one short one right around 30.
Can radials bend? That's a question I have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Some of mine do.
Are yours kind of symmetrical, Dan?
I tried to make it more or less balanced in a way, not necessarily symmetrical, but balanced. So if I had a 100-foot one on this side, I tried to put another 100-foot on the other side. Problem is that where my antenna is, I can't go the full 100 before I hit the road on the, I guess it would be like on the southeast side. So going out to my pasture, it's like easy peasy. It goes out there, the grass grew over top of it. I haven't seen them since I put them down in the spring. But yeah, so I try and balance it out on a 360, but they're not necessarily symmetrical as far as that's concerned. I think some of my shorter ones happen to be on my southeast side, but again, I don't think that really changed anything. I think what really improved my signal was when I added I had 3 down at first, and I was like, "Ooh, this sounds pretty good." And then once I put the rest of them on, I had 7. I was like, "Wow." Now, of course, I was using my 7300, which was somewhat brand new to me at the time, comparable to my TS2000, which really didn't have that great of a receiver. So that made a difference too. But I mean, I'm able to easily copy DX off of it, and I've gotten out. I can't wait to see what happens when I put the plate down and drop like another 10 radials in there this winter. This winter, I'm gonna have a lot of fun on 160.
Yep.
All right, Steve, I was going to ask this question as a follow-up because we all know that when it comes to contesting, we're all chasing mults and we're all trying to hang as many contacts as we can there. Are you using 160 a good bit in contests?
On when contests come on, a lot of these club stations in Europe participate. That's where you'll pop Eland Island, Guernsey, Jersey, Scotland. A lot of these places there, the French, they have their club stations. So there are a lot more stations on, and they're looking for multipliers too. And with my L, I can work them. And like the CQ Worldwide DXCW, I think I had 30 multipliers on 160.
Right. So that can make a huge difference.
Oh yeah. Well,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
you work everything you can for multipliers on a band, and you flip over 160, and there are all those Caribbean stations. V26B is always there. P40A. Aruba. All these places down in there are on looking for mults. Cayman Islands.
Right.
And actually, some of those are within earshot of a more compromised antenna than I have.
Right. So if you got 10 mults in a DX, or even 10 mults in a North American, you're just multiplying your score by 10.
Well, and you can work them quick. I mean, that's just it. I mean, I get on there and I work them quick and I get out. Right. I go back to 80 meters and go for new blood.
Right. But you
like
got
that.
the mult's working for you.
Actually, I've noticed in contests that 160 will open up quicker to Europe than 80. Normally, I've worked most of my 160 contacts before Europe comes in. Europe starts coming in later.
Yeah.
On 80 meters. And I mean, I can spot them and I can hear them, but I can't work them earlier in the evening. So I typically start on 40 into the night, because if you're working on 40 meters into Europe, you're getting 6 points for a QSO because you're working continent to continent. 40 meters, then I'll end up going to 160. Then I'll go to 80. Then I'll go back to 40 and see if anybody is up really late. Then I go to bed. After that.
Now, how does, from a propagation standpoint, I mean, obviously, depending on when the contest starts and this sort of stuff, will a lot of times start on 20, you migrate to 40 in the afternoon as it starts to heat up. You run 40 for a while until 80 starts heating up early evening. Does this go back to what Dan's saying, that you can expect 160 to come in real late?
I mean, Caribbean will pop up sooner than Europe. Once it gets dark, Caribbean will come in.
Okay.
But yeah, Europe starts to come in a little bit later than that. And I think a lot of that has to do with their gray line. I mean, when they start getting their gray line, like back in Hungary and Slovenia and those places that are a little deeper into the European continent, they'll start to come in before England, just because they're at their gray line or whatever. So, yeah, if you get a decent antenna on 160, you can work all those places. I mean, 9 Alpha, 1 Alpha, Croatia, these big club stations. I mean, I work them every year. Yeah. And I usually nail them first call.
Yeah. And just to give you guys a bit of it, like another bit of information, right now I was on 160 last night, because I wanted to see, if it's starting to warm up a little bit, because it's starting to get cooler at night. I don't think temperature has really anything to do with it. I think it just has to do with the time of the season. But right now, my noise level is like a S4, S5, and I'm hearing stations on FT8 at about 10 over S9 right now.
Well, and I'm on 160 as well. I'm monitoring, and while we've been sitting here for the last half hour, I've been able to decode Germany and England. I've decoded Brazil, Portugal, Iceland. All those have been decoded. Now, granted, they're all in the high 18, 19, 20s, but I'm decoding them. So my antenna is listening and it's hearing.
All right, well, just for grins and giggles here, let's design a starter 160 antenna
Are
system.
you going to use this for contesting, Spence?
You bet.
Okay, never mind. Goodbye. Have a good night. Nice seeing everybody.
Okay, here's what you do. You go get a coat hanger and stick it in where your antenna was in your automobile. Stick your
That's right.
rig in your Go Mobile and work the world.
That's right. Well, what I was going to say is that
Use this.
when
It's a 160 antenna
Oh
right
boy,
there.
Steven.
yeah,
Perfect.
but so I guess what I'm getting at is we want the vertical part to be as high as we can. So let's say you had a 50, 60 foot tree. You're in business, right? The top, shoot it out over top of the rest of the trees. If it's coated wire, it's a capacitance hat. Now, at the bottom of that, what does that look like? Steve, I saw where you have your variable capacitor vacuum tube deal. Stephen was talking about toroid. So I guess down there at the bottom of that, you're saying maybe a foot, 18 inches above ground, we've got to have some sort of a box that's going to have all these gizmos in it. Is that what we're looking at?
Some kind of transformer or a variable.
So what Steven's talking about versus what Steve is talking about is two completely different things.
Yes.
Okay.
What we're talking about with Steven, and I don't know that this answers your question, Spence, but I'm trying to figure, so I want to be able to play too. And the transformer that Steven is building is really an is for end-fed half wave, just like the my antennas that at least several of us are using now. And
Transformer, the one I'm describing is the 49-to-1 transformer, which basically takes the impedance of an end-fed half-wave antenna at 2450 ohms and brings it down to 50 ohms, so that way the transceiver is happy.
Yes.
Okay. And that's different than what Steve is doing then, right?
Right. Steve is adding capacitance.
Okay.
Yes.
And Stephen is adding inductance in, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Got it. Both named Steve.
So this is too complicated, and I'm not going to do a great job of explaining it. But with the transformer for the end-fed half wave, you have a wire that is, I forget what the number is, 131 feet. Apparently, you can when you have that wire up in the L configuration, you can bypass the transformer altogether and then transmit on that same wire using for 160 meters and for 60 meters.
Yes.
I guess
that's what I'm using. I'm just using a 1-to-1 balun.
Yes.
So it's a quarter.
The caveat to that is for that L to be effective, you need to have some radials in the ground.
Yep.
Okay. Whereas the end-fed, you don't have to have radials, is what you're saying?
That is correct, yes. But you should have at least 17 feet of coax from the transformer to at least 17 feet from the transformer to a 1-to-1 balun or your transceiver. But I don't think anybody's going to have 17 feet of coax between the transceiver and the antenna. So.
And I would assume having a common mode choke cuts out that the shield part, because I got 50 feet running to my transformer. I'm only copying about 8 stations right now on 160, and they're all US.
But
One
right
of
now,
AA.
I'm not copying any DX right now. That window is now closed. It'll open up again later tonight for me if I want to. But right now, everything I'm copying is there's France. France is -12, but for the most part, yeah, it's quieted down.
All right, from an efficacy standpoint on these two different, you've got an inverted L, you've got an end-fed half wave. And in what, Tom, you're doing a long wire?
Random wire, yeah.
Yeah, random wire.
But, yeah.
Okay, what is the anticipated performance / efficacy between those three?
Me, I'm looking just for a couple multipliers. I don't plan on getting into Europe or anything. I might, but if I can get a couple multipliers, I'm happy. So I'm not expecting much.
All right, but then between the end-fed and the inverted L, which one is going to be the better option?
I'd like to supplement your question because that's the same question that I have, but I want to add to that question. Can I get everything out of the inverted L with the tuner that I can out of an end-fed half wave? Because I don't want to give up what I can get currently out of my end-fed half wave.
Okay, basically what happens is the end-fed half wave and you take the transformer out of the equation becomes an inverted L because the inverted L that Steve is using is a quarter wave.
Well, I guess what I'm saying
So-
is I've heard Steven say that he can tune up his inverted L on a lot of different bands. And if he can do that on a lot of different bands, does that work as well as the end-fed half wave on, say, from 10 to 20 to 40?
Well, it depends on what
80.
it depends on what you want. I mean, if you have it set up as an inverted L, it's going to be a vertical. It's going to act as a vertical. So basically, the performance is going to be, like I said, it's going to be very similar depending on how many radios you have left out. Because, like I said, you're taking the transformer. If you're taking the end-fed half wave, you're taking the transformer out of the equation on 160. Then it becomes a regular inverted L. Just as long as you got the radios for it.
I think that's going to be the compromise that I make. I think that's what my current plan is.
Now, here's the thing. Now here's the thing. You people like Steve and them have created the solutions of remotely switching, the relay to take out the transformer from remotely from the shack, because why not? With a bias T, or if you want to, run out there and install a switch or knife switch or something similar like that to take it in and out, you can do that. But Don, I think what you're trying to say is you can basically have one antenna set up like that, and you can switch back between a regular end-fed half wave 80 through 10 and an inverted L for 160 with the flip of a switch if you have it configured, if you have it set up like that. So that way, I'm assuming, like you said, for if you have space constraints and stuff like that.
But
All right.
that's true. I agree with everything you said there. But Steve, the question was, I guess, directed to you, and that what bands explicitly do you get on your inverted L?
What bands?
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Was that
On your inverted L, can you cover all bands or only certain bands?
no, I cover them all. That's
Yeah, you just tune it.
when my DB18, my multi-band beam was down. I was saying that I was able to work the South Orkney Island, the Expedition, 160 through 15 meters. I felt very fortunate to do that. I had no idea that it would do that. Now, the thing is, when I change bands on my inverted L, I never go out and tune the variable capacitor in the box. I have a Palstar auto tuner here in the shack, and I tune it from there. But it just, my linear loves it. I have no problem putting the juice to it. I have no RF in the shack, and the sucker works. The only difference is, though, that I know there's more directivity once I get to 17, 15, 12, and 10 meters with the inverted L. The direction of the L, I think, may have something to do with that, or maybe it's because I've got some very short radials on the back side of my radial plate or whatever. But it is, I missed, what's his name? Tango Zulu 4 Alpha Mike in Mali. He was on 10 meters. And I saw him spotted, and I went there, and I could hear guys working them, but I couldn't hear them.
Have you ever had
them in three land?
Have you ever had an NFED half wave, Steve, to be able to compare what you can do with the L versus an NFED half wave?
Never. I've got one of those EFHW 8010s in here rolled up on an old 2-liter Coke bottle, but I had that for field day. I did put it up once to run it because I was trying to get into 80 meters. I was trying to out, but I
446 simplex. Yes, there is.
Somebody's coming.
no, I've never made.
Somebody got 2 meters coming in there.
No, that's 440. That's New Jersey coming in on 446.000.
Going back to the NFED, Stephen, I'll ask this: and I've seen these NFED half waves, out to 80 meters and this sort. Do they make one for 160?
Yes.
Who makes that?
I think My Antennas does. I think they have one on their website. It's basically 265 feet long, the wire.
Yep.
Now, I have seen a shorty, 160 meters. It's only like 70 feet long, but I'm really leery of putting something like that up.
A short one, you mean?
Yeah, shorty. Yeah, for limited space. It's got a PVC tube about yay long, and I'm sure it's all coiled up inside. And
now, do those come with coated wire?
Yeah.
The reason I'm asking this is my situation here is I've got my place, but then my mom's place is on up behind there. I bought my old home place here about 38 years ago, something like that. But at any rate, I've got a bunch of woods between here and there. I could get up on my roof with my air cannon and send a shot up over top of the trees. And that's why I'm thinking NFED at this point in time. You think that would work?
Well, with the 160 meter NFED, that isn't an all band antenna like
Right.
the 80 to 10.
No, that's what I'm saying is that this would be on an I have an antenna switch here. I could have that for
Yeah, it is
just for
an
180.
option. It is definitely an option, and I think, and also the benefit is it'll work on 60 meters also. I think that's the other band that I'm pretty sure that's. Yeah, I didn't really look at it that much, but I do know one exists.
Right.
I didn't really look at it that much because I barely have enough room for 130 feet of wire, let alone 260.
Right.
So.
Hey guys, I gotta run. I gotta go outside. So sorry.
Walk the pasture.
You walk the pasture.
Okay.
Right.
Don't step in
Yeah.
anything.
Nice.
Don't step in nothing.
Yeah, it happens.
I
See ya.
guess what
Put your
I'm
rubber
getting
boots
at.
on.
Yeah.
Yep, got my muck boots.
I guess what I'm getting at is, okay, you're going to go through a certain amount of drama regardless of what we're going to do for a 160 meter option.
Yeah.
Where are you getting your best bang for the buck, do you think?
Listening to Gary and Steve talk.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the DX comes off the vertical. If you can't go vertical, you've got to expect limited success.
Okay. So
That's all I can say.
that's the answer then, right? The vertical is important because of what, takeoff angle?
Yeah. And if you want to work, like if you want to work the States, you'll have trouble getting Alaska and Hawaii on a dipole. But, I worked out to Wyoming on a 160 dipole. Like I said, I had that one magic QSO with that guy in Australia. That was on sideband 160 even. But still, yeah, if you want to get 100 countries, you got to go vertical. That's my belief.
Right.
I mean,
what do you figure the cost point is between them?
I need to soften that. K2 PLF Marty does not have a vertical on 160. He has an inverted V. The apex is up about 55 feet. And I think Marty's got his 100 countries on 160. I think, though, it took longer.
Right.
I think the conditions just have to be right to be able to do that. So I don't want to say that, you know, if you're forced to put up a dipole, put it up.
Well, and I guess what I'm getting at too, and I know that we're recording this and that other people would be interested in hearing this, to give them the realities of life. Not only have we talked about the differences between a vertical and a horizontal, we've talked about the importance of the radial field, that sort of stuff. What is the reality of the cost of doing business there? Obviously, an end-fed half wave is going to be somewhat different than buying the vacuum tube variable capacitor versus the toroid to make the transformers, that type of stuff. So we probably talking the difference between what, $500 in the vertical, maybe?
I did, well, like I said, I swapped for the variable capacitor. I didn't buy it.
Right.
Dave gave me the box. I mean, I walked out of there with a handful of stuff that he had accumulated from his previous work life. And I swapped for it. So I don't have that kind of money. I mean, I spent more on ground wire than I did on anything else. And the radial plate was $80.
Right. I've seen those, and yeah.
I don't know what it is. And the collars were 80, yeah. I mean, that's the most expensive items for me.
Right. Now,
I'm just going to say, Spence, everything costs $1,000.
Yeah, I think you're right, Don. That's just about right.
By the time you get the coax, you get the antenna. Yeah, that antenna doesn't cost that much. Then you got to get the coax, and you got to get the mast, then you got to get all the other stuff.
And Scott has to authorize it first before you can call me.
That's true. That's true. But now, Steve, going back to that variable capacitor, educate us a little bit on that. Now, I mean, obviously that is just not made for amateur radio usage. That is a commercial type of variable capacitor. Where are those found, number one, and number two is what are they generally used for? That's a pretty big capacitor.
Yeah, and be honest with you, I don't know. I mean, what I know about what I've been talking about tonight, I got from Dave.
Okay.
Dave was in communications. So I think the story goes that when he was retiring or something, he would take some of these, and he had them.
Okay.
But I do believe they're a commercial item. Yep.
Yeah, because they look like a serious piece of equipment.
So it's a serious piece of gear, no question about it. When he showed it to me, I looked at it. What the hell is that?
Yeah.
You know, I thought it was an egg timer.
Yeah.
But then he described what it was about.
How did you tune that? I noticed you when you were talking about the top on the plastic piece up on top there and the tuning part of it. What are you tuning it for, and how are you tuning it?
I've got a rig expert like a lot of the guys.
Right.
So I put my rig expert on it. I put the frequency in at 1.840, and I just go in there and I turn that little knob at the top until I get minimum SWR, and away I go. I'm done.
So it's set it and forget it, right?
Set it and forget it. I don't retune it on any other band.
Right.
I can tell you, Spence, at some point I'm going to have data on using an end-fed half wave with a bypass. The timing might be a while, though. It may not happen.
Well, I think that would be another interesting session sometime, is to talk about end-fed half waves, because I do know that that has been somewhat of a NEMARC standard in a lot of ways there, and one of the recommendations on the website there. So I think that that would be good. This has been a fascinating conversation there.
I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, the end-fed half wave is a very good starter antenna. Can you do better? Absolutely. But I mean, like if you, and the main thing that I like to stress is that, especially if you have constraints, if you live in any kind of neighborhood that has an HOA or slash pesky spouse slash pesky neighbor slash pesky operator like yourself, maybe. I mean, you know, there could be all sorts of variables. That is for what it is, that it's an excellent choice. Now, obviously, the opinion also with that is, if you can do better, do it.
Right.
But it is a viable option. And now on 160 is going to be a challenge, obviously. And by the way, I just looked at the My Antennas website. They discontinued the 160 end-fed half wave, so that's no longer available from their website.
That doesn't mean it couldn't be built.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, you can build it if you want. I'm guessing probably because not enough sales, maybe, or since it's 265 feet of wire, I'm sure there's been a lot of breakage and stuff like that, and it's become a liability to guaranteed. Those are my guesses.
But if it was coated wire and you shot it up over top of the trees, this goes back to Steve, the question I was going to ask Steve too, is that you shoot that coated wire up over top of the trees, that's your capacitor. Let's say I got a white oak tree up here behind the house. I could probably get 70 feet on the thing if I rigged something up there and got that up there. So that's my vertical part. If the L that's going up over top of the trees and laying up there in the foliage, and then when the foliage is off, it's going to settle down somewhat, is that going to be okay staying up there as far as that goes?
Well, the other thing is, I have a pulley up at the top, and the pulley has two ropes. One to pull the pulley back down, and another one to pull the pulley back up if my wire ever breaks.
Right.
So the capacitance hat is in the clear. It's not touching anywhere. I was able to finagle that so that it would shoot straight out from the tree. Where it touches the tree twice is on the way up.
Okay. On the vertical
describe
section.
What a capacitance.
I just
can't
put
even
some
say it.
DX here on 160.
Yeah, AK3B. Yeah, FM19. I was just thinking Steve must be bored to death giving that guy a call. I mean, he's probably practically your neighbor.
I got my 80. Got one of my.
I don't even have AC log up.
Hey,
You
Steve,
don't?
No, because I got to cover all your faces up. All right, I'll move it.
Well, that's a kind of a blessing in disguise, isn't it?
well, now, Steve, going back to that, while you're doing that, Don had a question there about explaining the concept of the capacitance hat that forms up there on the top of the L.
Yeah, see, I know that's what it is, but I don't know why. I mean, that's not my area. I don't have
that, but that is the difference between the difference between the L and the transformer. The capacitance is on the L. The inductance is with the toroids, correct?
Like I say, that's not my area.
I think that's what Stephen was indicating at one point, wasn't it, Stephen?
Yeah.
I think what's going to happen over here, so I don't know the answers to any of those. I know what, and I think we did get permission. This has been extremely informative because my limitations are in terms, I can't get along vertical. I can get 44 feet. I guess that's that's not great, but it's not 10 feet either.
Right, it's doable.
And so I'm going to take that end-fed half wave, and even if I'm not using it for 160, I wanted to see what happens when we put it as an L configuration, which isn't what I have now, as opposed to just having it parallel over the ground. in my case, what I've done that I don't think a lot of people do with their end-fed half waves is my transformer for that end-fed half wave is at the top of my pole. So that's it. Right now it's about 40 feet. I ran out of coax. I could have had another 4 feet, but my coax wasn't long enough to get it up there. And so that's at the top of a fiberglass pole that's fairly wonky with a few guy lines on it. And then my wire stretches out over a pretty nice area, common area that we have in the back to a pole that's about 30 feet. So I don't think that's a terrible situation for that end-fed half wave. It does have some directionality to it, though, which shows up sometimes depending on who I can make contacts with or not. So the next part of the experiment is I don't know what the outcome's going to be. I didn't know that people were putting their end-fed half waves up in L configurations. So I don't know if when I put that end-fed half wave up in an L configuration with the transformer down at the bottom and the L happening at 44 feet, if that's going to compromise it for my local, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to compromise it for the more local contacts or make it better for DX contacts.
I would say just if you have the flexibility, do it.
Just do it. Put it up there and see what happens.
That's what I'm
and document it. Document it so that way you know that way you know what is different. If there anything is different with new configuration, so that way you can, you know, I mean that's the whole name of the game is to just try it out.
I've done a lot of that, so you know it's just an experiment.
That's all it is.
If you put the hammer down, put the hammer down and you start your dishwasher, you know it's not working right. You know.
Don, would you leave your transformer in the same place with the L from your end-fed? And then use the same transformer?
I'm going to make the one. So I also like making things. So I sort of like going through this stuff, and I'm going to use the one that Steve was talking about that uses the 52 mix as opposed to the 42 mix. Now, all I know is that somebody told me that was better. I don't know how to analyze the data that he put up there. You know, I have to trust that somebody with more knowledge than me.
The way I look at it, just run with it. You're going to drive yourself crazy trying to analyze it.
Yep. So I'm just going to give it a try.
I mean, he did all the hard work, so just do it.
Yep. Steve, going back to your configuration there where you have that box, you were saying it's about 1 foot to 18 inches above the ground. Then what are you doing? Coming out of coax out of the bottom of that, your LMR 400, and just laying it on the ground, or did you bury it or what?
I buried it.
Okay.
Yep.
How long of a run back to the house is that, do you figure?
75 feet.
Okay.
Too many grandkids. I had to bury my radials too.
Yeah. I'm going to say, I've seen people say that you could lay your radials out there and horse pin them down to the dirt a little bit there, and the grass will grow up over them or something.
Gary's are laying out on the ground right now. He has about 30 some radials, and they're all laying on top of the ground. I haven't been to his house. I need to go there. I mean, he's come here and helped me with antennas and stuff. I want to go up there and see what he's doing.
And he has young kids, so evidently they're not playing in the woods back there.
I guess not. You know, he must have that wooded area back there where it's out of the way and it's not in his yard. For me, I had no choice. It's my back.
Yeah, he's got a lot of wooded
my
space
big
behind
thing
his
is I don't need the lawn service showing up with an aerator.
Yeah. That'd be
it's going to put 3-inch plugs in the ground. I mean, they're going to cut up my field.
Yeah.
Might as well forget about
yeah, that wouldn't be a good idea, probably. Well, folks, this has been a great conversation tonight. I've learned a lot, and it makes me want to get on 160 and push that button after all. And like I say, from a pure contest standpoint, you know, a multiplier is a multiplier, and if you picked up 10 on a stateside contest, even if it was, you know, Eastern Coast, that would be 10 more than you started out with. So that would be a good idea there. But this has been great. And if you guys happen to, Tom, you did record this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. If we could, if we would attach, do we have the capacity to attach the video to our notice about this 160?
I send it to Dean.
Dean, and he'll mix it up.
He does some. He cuts out the vulgar stuff that we talk about, the dirty stuff, and then
Right.
he posts it somewhere. I'm not
Okay.
sure where.
Well, one of the things that I would encourage us to do when we talk about some of these topics, and that's how I try and post them up there. I posted this one about 160 meters so that somebody could search that if they wanted to refer back. Some of these things like the toroid mixes and where you can go to eBay to find this variable capacitor, things like that. I wrote down some notes here about the N4LQ and the K6MM and 14 gauge house wire coded and eaglemade.net Jennings capacitor. If we could put some of those things, just even if you clicked on that thing on our reflector there and put the links to any of these things, that would be a good repository for some information if somebody was, doing some research into 160 meter antenna. But that would be very helpful there. I do appreciate everybody's input. Man, I always come out of these Elmers fireside chats thinking I got to stick corks in both ears so it doesn't all pour out there after what we get done learning here in the evenings. But I do appreciate everybody's information. I'm working on next month to try and have the Pitcairn Island, a friend of mine here in West Virginia, Hal Turley, was actually on that Pitcairn Island de-expedition. He's been on a number of de-expeditions, and he did a presentation for our state convention here a couple of weeks ago, and it was fascinating. And I'm going to try and have him on for next month. What goes into a de-expedition? I had no idea how intense, how labor intensive, and how expensive it is. So whenever I sit there, it made me really appreciate, well, is a $10 donation to get a QSL cord worth it? Yeah, in the grand scheme of things, you're doggone right it's worth it, because I didn't have to go to Pitcairn Island. So we'll try and do that next time. I'm working on that now. And in the meantime, thanks for everybody showing up. Scott will just have to learn about this some other time then, right? Because he didn't stay up for us.
Thank you. Everything was, I'm like a sponge just listening.
I
I'm
think
still learning all
I
this
think
stuff.
we should have
Thank
added
you.
a segment with